I think that there are a lot of people in this community, in the online RPG space, I mean, that are resistant to the idea that there is another way of doing things.
Welcome to the Red Caps Podcast, a podcast where we dip our caps into the blood of our listeners and we ramble on a bit old school games. In today's episode, we are going to be chatting with Harmony Ginger, a DM who has been experimenting with her game and chatting about it on Twitter. The concepts that she's been trying and talking about are not new. However, the way that she has been communicating about them is kind of different compared to how they have been recently online. So in this chat, you're going to hear us talk about one-to-one time, Braunstein, and other concepts that have helped her game, and how she has weaponized politeness to win over people online. And we're just going to get a sense of who she is as a person. So, as always, I hope you can sit back, listen, and enjoy. I will now hand it over to the interview. How are you doing today?
Hi, I'm doing pretty well.
So I invited you on because you've had a bunch of interesting conversations online recently where you've tried out some new things in your home games, tried some experiments, found some results, put them out, and seemed like it generated quite a lot of interest. A lot of people like really interested in some of the stuff that you've been doing with your games recently.
Yeah, I didn't expect that at all. I didn't really anticipate that this was going to generate nearly as much interest that it has. I don't particularly think I'm doing anything too new to people. I know I was inspired by a Twitter post by Alchemic Raker to do my current campaign. Um, and when I started it out, I didn't think that it would be anything revolutionary or anything that important. But I've gotten a lot of comments, a lot of questions, people wanting to have conversations about it. And I'm kind of realizing that this isn't a normal approach to TTRPGs at all.
I think it's I think a lot of people really like the approach that you've taken with it, because often, especially on social media stuff, and I'm not sure if it's just because of the way people choose to engage, but a lot of the times you have people bring forth something, and instead of it being, hey, I tried this and this is what happened, it's more like, you should do this or you shouldn't do that. And I think your approach has changed how your conversational approach to how you've done it is what's maybe sparked the conversation a little bit more. But I guess maybe in case anybody doesn't know, what are some of the things that you've experimented with? Like what's been the most I guess shocking experiment that you've had that's worked out that you didn't expect it to at the beginning, and then what's one that maybe you expected more of that didn't happen?
Right. So there are two main approaches that I'm taking in this game that I haven't taken before. One is more of a Braunstein world creation game, where each player takes the role of a different god in the world. Now, the players create the gods themselves. And each player takes the role of a god, and then you sort of have a pseudo war game that's a bit on the abstract side going on, where each player is molding the terrain, creating the civilizations, figuring out what races they want to be in the world. And they have different powers and different things that they can do to affect the world depending on what their domains are. And what I did was I did a draft with the domains. I gave each of them 3 of them at random, and they picked 2 and then made a god based on that. And that's how the world kind of was created. And then the second thing is, once that phase was over, we went to what is known as one-to-one time, which is more of a Gygax style thing where the game world moves at the exact rate of the real world. We use a real world calendar for in-game. And as far as what interesting has happened because of this, the answer is a lot. I've found a lot of quirks in these systems that I didn't know before going in. I've seen players just seem to not get it at first, but then like somewhere around the 3 to 5 session mark, I think it sort of began to click with them, and they're plotting, they're working together, they're utilizing their downtime in ways I haven't seen them do before, and each of them are kind of figuring out what they're going to do still as their gods, because each player is controlling both a god and a character in the world. Some of them are controlling more than one character, and they're trying to figure out exactly how this stuff connects and how they are at odds with the rest of the group in some ways. I don't know. There's a lot of interesting things going on that I could never have planned.
And with one-to-one time, because there seems to be a lot of people have different interpretations of what that means, and I think it's an interesting concept depending on how you implement it. For me, anytime I've tried it, I've always done it where while we're at the table, we run sessions same as you always would in terms of how you keep time, but it's in between the sessions that we would revert back to one-to-one time. Is that how you're doing it as well?
Of
Or
course.
yeah.
Yes, that's basically how it's supposed to go. During the session, people who think that you are doing one-to-one time during the session, like every turn is 6 seconds or a minute, depending on the edition you're playing, and if you have to go on a 2-hour journey, you have to sit there and wait in your seat quietly for 2 hours. That's not how it works.
Yeah,
Not at all.
it's a little absurd to have that sort of
Yeah.
an opinion, but it seems
Right.
like it comes up quite often. And I wonder if it's because people are just trying to find something goofy to go on the concept, or if they're actually legitimately confused. Like I was wondering the other day, I saw that same sort of an argument come up, and I was wondering if the person they seemed new to the OSR in general, and they had been talking about Shadow Dark, and I was wondering if they were taking some of the concepts of Shadow Dark in terms of like how it keeps time for torches, and thinking that somehow translated over or something along those lines. But yeah, I think there's a misconception of what one time it actually is.
I don't know. And I don't know a lot about Shadow Dark either. I have heard nothing but amazing things about the game, the community, and the game designers of Shadow Dark, though. So no shade. I just don't
Yeah,
know much about it.
yeah.
Mhm.
It's every other day there's a new game, so it's almost nearly
Right.
impossible to keep up with them. What is it that you primarily play?
So I have played all sorts of editions of Dungeons and Dragons. My current game is in 5th edition. However, I've played many of the editions, and I am actually getting ready to play in an AD&D game. I learned how to play about maybe a month, 2 months ago, something like that. But also, I have played several different RPGs. I've played Pathfinder and Numenera, Shadowrun, not Shadow Dark. I almost said Shadow Dark. Um, Other things like that. But I think my favorite, mostly for the classic setting, is really any edition of Dungeons and Dragons. I've always enjoyed the settings, the magic in it, and I don't know, something about it just clicks for me.
Yeah, I think well, there's the name recognition of it as well, but there's
Mhm.
certain tropes that comes with D&D in particular that I think we've all taken into our cultural zeitgeist, and just that's what Fantasyland is stuff from D&D in a lot of cases. So that makes complete sense. And so we mentioned you mentioned earlier one-to-one time is kind of a Gygax concept, and
Yes.
it's definitely for the most of the people that are using it are generally coming from an older school standpoint. Applying it to a 5e game, was there anything that you found? I wouldn't imagine, but was there anything different applying it to 5e than if somebody was going to apply it to AD&D or OSE or BX or anything along those lines?
Yes. I have definitely noticed some differences. So this is going to be very difficult to explain, actually. 5e has a pretty decent core, but I think there are a lot of details around 5e that just aren't quite right for this that I'm noticing. They do have downtime activities in the DMG. They have all sorts of guidelines to adjudicate some of this stuff, but it doesn't feel as tight and tested as the AD&D DMG. And the reason that's important for me, obviously, I can just house rule it. Anybody can just house rule. But the reason that's important for me is because I like to be able to show my players rules and be like, these are the rules. You guys can do what you want within this framework. Because the thing about having very tight rules is they can empower players. Like, people tend to think that looser rules are more empowering to players, but that's not true, because then they need to go to the DM and ask Mother May I on every single thing they do. When if you have a tight set of rules, players can look at it, they can figure out what is doable and what is not doable and act accordingly, and they don't need the DM fiat on everything. So I would definitely say, I don't know if I would say I made a mistake by going with 5e here, but I received a little bit of pushback from my players when I said, maybe we ought to try something else. But so I was like, we're trying enough new stuff already. We'll just go ahead and stick with 5e. And I kind of am regretting that to some degree. But what sort of pushed me over the edge of using it is I've never run AD&D myself, and so I was a little bit nervous to run a game that I had limited experience with.
AD&D, especially if you're a person that wants to make sure you're sticking strictly to the rules, AD&D can be a bit of a bite to take out of an apple, because it's what I love. AD&D, it's a great game, but man, for all of Gary's strengths, both the player handbook and the DMG, rules are scattered all over the place. There's inconsistencies at times, so it can be difficult to keep AD&D played raw. It's easy to play AD&D, but if you were a person that I gotta have it super raw, I think it's a difficult one, especially if it's your first time coming in. But so I mean, playing with what your table's comfortable with at the end of the day is what's important, right? If your players don't want to play a different system, then playing the system that's there, a game is better than no game.
Sure. And it wasn't all of my players. It was, there are a couple that are a little bit, what's the word, intimidated, I guess, by newer systems. I say newer systems when I'm talking about going back
Newer to
30,
them.
40 years, but yes, systems that are new to them. So I would rather maintain my current players and do something that we're comfortable with at the end of the day. Though I do see the merits in going back to AD&D, because a lot of times I can't just give my players the 5e downtime rules and be like, all right, you can do this, because some of them maybe don't make as much sense. And some of the 5e rules aren't quite as tight as I would like them to be. Though I do maintain that 5e has a fairly high quality core to it.
What's been the most interesting downtime activity somebody's taken?
One of my players got a job at a casino, and they are using that as their downtime activity is, first of all, working at the casino. They're making a couple gold per week based off it. And also they are trying to, she's trying to get a map of the place and
Chasing
figure
the
out where the
jag.
weak points are. Yeah, because she knows that the casino is cheating their customers by using diviners. So
Oh, she's going to different. When you first mentioned that,
yeah.
I thought she was casing it to rob the place, but
Oh, she is.
okay.
She 100% is casing it to rob the place.
But it's morally okay because they're already cheating.
Exactly.
Gotcha. I understand now.
Yeah.
Very good. Was there anybody? So you said at the very beginning, like 3 to 5 sessions it took for people to kind of get into it. What was when you first introduced it and you guys went through the first couple of sessions and they were in between? What seemed to be the thing that was throwing them off the most? Like what?
That's a hard question. I think through the first couple sessions, people were training between sessions just because you have to train for a week to level. So people were doing that between sessions. And they kind of didn't get really a whole lot that they could do with their downtime. And also, I was new to adjudicating downtime activities as well. So I don't know that I was helping them to the fullest extent. But they started to get it. They're starting to really like the fog of war, because I can, throw them a couple quest leads. Maybe I can throw them like some hints to things, maybe some things going on in the world, some things that they would know about between sessions, and they talk about it together. And nobody knows if somebody's keeping something from the group because they have the latitude to do so. And in some cases, they may even have the motivation to do so. And the weird cooperative game with a fog of war, so no one actually knows what everybody is doing behind the scenes, is a unique concept for them, or for all of us, not just them. But we used to be sort of a war game group. We played games like Twilight Imperium. So going from that to D&D, we went from competitive games to cooperative games. And then from the D&D we played, which is kind of more of a conventional, what you think when you think of like a 5e game. I hope it was a little bit better just because we had campaigns that went on years. So I hope that I ran them well, but there's always room to improve for everybody. So we went from that to kind of a more cooperative game, but with a fog of war and some incentive for competitive behavior among the players.
Yeah, you've kind of we haven't mentioned it, but you've kind of introduced domain play essentially by giving
Yes.
them the god character as well. So you've got a domain play, the downtime and what have you built in there. So yeah, you can totally see the influences from a wargaming standpoint, as opposed to what many people would see as a D&D game now if they were coming into it fresh.
Yes, it's somewhere between the two. And I think some people argue that this is how D&D was meant to be played from its inception. And I I have some leanings towards that argument. I'm not sure if I buy it 100%. I don't know if I've done enough research to, but I definitely can see that argument.
I see it as a
Mhm.
style of play that
Yeah,
can be like, I mean, I never liked the whole this is how it should be played, because it's a game where you're hanging with friends. So
sure.
if this is what your friends enjoy doing, if you and your friends are having a good time, you're doing it right. Um, but I think it definitely is showing a, a little bit deeper side of D&D whenever you can have that fog of war. Whenever the players come back and they're like, I'm not sure if your players spend a bunch of time on Discord
Yeah.
talking during in between sessions, or
Hmm.
if they're dominating the first half of their session, going, okay, while we were on downtime, I managed to find this or this. But I'm not sure which way they're doing it. But in both cases, it's really neat seeing those discussions and sitting back like a fly on the wall and just watching it happen.
Yeah, a bit of both.
And
There.
are they
Oh,
also going behind your back a little bit on it as well? Are they doing it? Is there player with DM excluded planning happening?
well, if they were doing that, I'm not sure if I would know. So I don't know how to answer that question. The answer is I see two of them sitting in chat right now, so maybe. Um, but also they could be talking about something completely different. So I don't know.
Good stuff. I mentioned at the beginning, you've kind of gone on a little bit of a media blitz. I've seen you on a few different streams, and you're starting up your own streaming. Actually, I think it's tonight, right?
Yeah, it is.
And how has all that gone? Like, with how has the jumping into the on air stuff been going for you?
I'm a very camera shy person. Um, so it's been a little bit weird. I've definitely started to get over that a little bit. I started with T-shirted historians this week in geek. And I still jump on that one occasionally. He's a really gracious host. I appreciate how he put up with me not knowing what I was doing for a while. But I've also been on, oh gosh, several other streams. I was on Wick TV earlier this week. I was on, gosh, who else have I even been on with? Has it just been T-shirt? No way.
I
I've
think T-shirts
forgotten.
the last one I saw you on
Yeah,
was.
I've forgotten who else. I've been on other streams. I just don't remember who.
What's been so camera shy?
Hmm.
What do you think, as you've had the discussions with different folks? Has there been anything, and people ask questions and you're thinking about it, reflecting on it, and being able the answers? Has there been anything that's kind of been like an aha moment, or something that you've kind of figured out uh, about things that are going on that you didn't realize before you started chatting with everybody?
Um, I think that there are a lot of people in this community, in the online RPG space. I mean, that are resistant to the idea that there is another way of doing things, because I think that some people, not most people, but some people are afraid to learn that they've been running games for so long, and some of the knowledge that they've had running these games doesn't necessarily translate to the experience that they wish to create. I think some people are afraid of unlearning certain things, because what I see happening is I think that a bunch of newer people came into the space a couple years ago. And I mean, I think some of us know who they are, and that's okay. And they sort of came in and rediscovered AD&D, and they decided to play it like very much by the book, by the rules. And they used a lot of rules that other groups threw out 20, 30 years ago. And I think they had some very interesting results with that. And groups and dungeon masters who have been playing without these rules for so long have been fairly resistant to this conversation for the understandable reason that they've been in the space longer, they've been reading this stuff longer, they very much feel like they know this stuff and are somewhat resistant to the wisdom that a fresh set of eyes can provide.
Yeah, there is the grumpy grognard attitude that can come out, and so I'm not saying that disparagingly, but more of like a set in your ways type of thing where you have something that you think works well for you, and you see somebody coming in that's just like, again, I guess to use the stereotype, young whippersnapper coming in and telling me how to do what I've been doing forever. I've been doing it since before you were born type attitude.
I understand the mindset, and I do not say this to disparage these people.
Yeah.
But I didn't realize how much it was going on until I started sharing about my game on Twitter and sharing what was happening with my group using domain play and one-to-one time and how this was affecting our game. And I've gotten a good number of comments from people who are not just skeptical of the ideas, but are skeptics because of the people who use the ideas, which I'm not certain is a healthy mindset. I'm an ideas person. I don't care where the idea came from. I really don't. If it helps my games improve, then I'm interested in trying them.
Yeah, I think a lot of it, I think you hit it right on the head there in terms of it's maybe has nothing to do with the idea at all. It may simply be who they perceived having promoted the idea or come up with the idea, or the person who initiated the conversation around it. And I think part of the reason the ideas that you've brought up and the experiments that you've had have all been discussed countless times over the last 50 years by tons of different people. But I think when it comes to particularly the Twitter space of RPG online stuff, it's there was a group of folks that came in with a very different attitude. They had a persona. It wasn't just their idea.
Yeah.
It was the persona that they brought with said idea that I think turned people off to the point where they're like, your persona I don't like, so therefore everything you say is now invalid. Whether or not that is a healthy way of doing anything, I don't think so either. I think, you can separate art from artist, you can separate idea from personality, but I think that's what heat up that whole space as being, no, we don't want anything to do with that because this person supports it.
Certainly, yeah.
But and you've kind of in many ways flipped that around a little bit by, I think I could be quoting it wrong, as I don't have it up my screen right now, but something does your Twitter page say something like you're something killing everything with kindness, or you're forget how you worded it now on your Twitter profile. I should bring it up on my screen.
So those were not my words.
Okay.
Those were words that were said about me.
Okay.
And I don't think they were meant to be flattering either. But I liked them. So yeah, my Twitter bio right now says aggressive niceness, weaponized docility, and a complete absence of kayfabe.
Kayfabe, yeah.
Yeah, kayfabe, is that how you say that? I'm not 100%. I've never heard it pronounced.
Yeah, it's a wrestling term.
Yeah, it's like the only wrestling term I know. I know 3 wrestling terms now. I know kayfabe, face, and heel. Those are the only 3 wrestling terms I know. And I learned them all from RPG discussion.
You can now go and sit and watch a WWE or an AEW thing and completely understand the conversation that's happening, because everything else is basically Dungeons and Dragons in many ways. It's just people role playing. Okay. But now you've got the terminology for the good guys, the bad guys, and whenever the good guys are keeping up their act. So yeah, you're all set. We were talking about the personalities that were there before. You're having a conversation with one of those polar personalities this evening.
Yes.
Having that as your choice for your very first stream is awesome. I think that's super great, kind of taking that as the very first one. Was there any concerns around doing it, or was there even an idea of doing the streams before that conversation got negotiated between you and
absolutely? So I've been wanting to start streaming, start talking about my games on YouTube a bit more for a long time. I never quite knew how to start. It's a very daunting thing to start. And so I was kind of talking about it on Twitter. And so the person I am speaking to, we're not afraid to say his name here, it is Jeffro Johnson. And he and I have never spoken before. So what happened was he and I, we've had this fairly contentious relationship on Twitter where he has posted like a blog. He has a blog of all these ideas that he's used in his games, and I've been using similar ideas, somewhat influenced by his blog. And we have definitely said things that were unfavorable about each other on Twitter. I'm not going to point any fingers or say who started what, but we've definitely said some unfavorable things about each other. And we've never spoken though. But he messaged me and was basically said, "Hey, this would be really funny if for your first stream we talked." And look, I don't know if we like or dislike each other. I don't really know where we stand, but we both agree that this would be really funny. And so I'm down for it.
I'm interested to see, because I'll be watching this evening as well.
Oh, thank you.
But I'm interested to see, because I've not had any interactions with Jeffro one-on-one either. I've communicated with him very, very little on Twitter and mostly been an observer. But with him and several other members of the community that's on there, that of really active OSR / tabletop RPG people on Twitter, there are certain people that I have always felt are more persona, or that they're putting on a face. They're acting as a heel on purpose, not because they necessarily genuinely believe everything they say, but because it brings attention. And I'm interested to see if you get a sense from him later on whether that's the case, whether he's has an act on, and he's just the ideas are definitely ideas that he believes in, but the way that he verbalizes them and shares them, is that a persona, is that an act, or is that actually how the person really is?
I will say I'm not going to attempt to speak for Jeffro on this stream because I don't know him
Right.
at all. But I do think he has this way of saying something that lots of people would agree with, but in like the most disagreeable way imaginable. Like, he can definitely make you disagree with something that, like, if anyone else presented it to you, you'd be like, "Oh yeah, that's not bad."
Yeah. He's not the only one. I've seen a bunch of
No.
other people that will come out and do very similar actions, and I'm so curious about what the mindset on that is. Is it? I don't know. I need to maybe have a conversation with him on that too, or things that maybe you should ask him for me.
So,
But
oh, I'm not asking him about this tonight. We're
this
talking about games. Um, but I do think that what it is an attempt to build a counterculture that is more than just saying 5e is bad, WotC is bad, was like the culture is bad. I think it's an attempt to build onto like more of a fraternity style WWE counterculture. Because one thing that they have right. So let me just go on record and say I'm not part of the Bro SR. I don't want to be. I'm not a bro. I'm not a dude. I don't want in their games. I don't want to be any part of their group chats, their whatever they've got going, right? That's a fraternity. I think single sex spaces are perfectly fine. There is nothing wrong with doing that. I'm more trying to build my own thing with me and my players, and we are having a great time. I'm using some of their concepts, and I think there's nothing wrong with that. However, I believe that what they are doing on Twitter is an attempt to build some sort of fraternity counterculture that actually has their own culture, rather that is more so than saying WotC is bad, 5e is bad, wokeness is bad. I think they're actually trying to build something, like it or not.
Yeah, I can kind of see that a little bit. I mean, I've rallied in the past and said that the terminology OSR, for instance, at one point had a fairly narrow definition, and that definition has grown and expanded to such a point where it's almost meaningless, because what could be considered an OSR game now is such a vast thing that the definition seems almost, almost meaningless. So I can see them almost taking, not wanting to be associated with that label, because they want a more specific, narrowly defined thing for how they're going about it. And they chose BroSR for whatever reason. I guess again, marketing, because it's OSR was already kind of in the namespace, but yeah, I've found that there's been, even folks that aren't necessarily in the BroSR, I just find on social media there's this tendency, no matter what space it's in, we happen to be talking about tabletop RPGs, but there always seems to be that a subset of people that I honestly question at times whether they're actually believing that what they're putting out, or if it's put out simply to be a counter, or to be to be something that sparks emotion so that there becomes engagement.
I think it's meant to be funny.
Yeah, it could definitely be
In a lot
a
of
parody
ways, yeah.
in a lot of ways as well. Parody that just doesn't get ever grasped, though, at a certain point. Like everybody takes it as if it's legitimate, and then it seems to take on a life of its own because of that.
So I personally think a lot of it is, I don't want to say posturing, but it's more of a gatekeeping test. Like they are going around saying what they want. They're actually pretty funny.
And
But
if you get offended,
right. If you get offended, if you want nothing to do with them, all right, you failed the test. That's cool. They don't want to have anything to do with you either. If you are gonna roll with the jokes and send them right back, then I think they're cool with you. That's sort of what I've seen. I think that a lot of people would disagree with that, and that's fine. I don't claim to be any sort of speaker for the Bro SR.
no, but that
I'm
makes
not.
complete sense. We have,
Mhm.
I mean, growing up, that was kind of how our friends also kept our friend groups together. Like
Yeah,
if somebody was picking on you, it wasn't because they didn't like you. That was a sign that you were in the group, and it was the people that they didn't talk to at all. That was, you know, it was basically, oh, so and so's teasing me. Well, that that means that you're in the group. They like you. They're including you. They know you well enough to be able to tease you.
and I think that there is this tendency among all male groups to do this thing where they bully each other into improving, and that's something you don't see in mixed sex groups or female groups. But guys will pick on each other and bully each other for doing things that that they want each other to improve. Is kind of where it's at. It's sort of a fraternity culture thing that I've picked up on. I sense that that's a lot of what's happening here, and some men are on board with it, and some men have reservations about it. A lot of women have reservations about it. But
you've been playing for a while. You mentioned that
mhm.
you've played a bunch of different games. You're doing
Yeah.
wargaming in the past. Both tabletop RPGs and wargaming, especially, seems to have this whole concept of there's females are ostracized out of it, or aren't welcomed in. Has your general sense been that has it been an issue? Has it not been an issue in places that you've tried to come into?
So first of all, when I talk about wargaming, I'm not talking about like 1v1 skirmish Warhammer style. My sort of wargaming is larger group wargaming, like civilization style games. Twilight Imperium is one that I really love. Uh, Diplomacy style.
Yeah.
And I do think that is a still fairly male dominated space. Um, I'm not going to say I've never experienced sexism because that would be disingenuous. I think there are jerks everywhere. I have the people who brought me in to wargaming and introduced me to it were older men. For the most part, if I am going to a meetup or someone's house to play a game like Diplomacy, I don't have anything to fear. They're always very cool to me. I personally think that most people like to see an audience of of the games they play expanded. Um, I So I'm not going to say it's never been an issue, but by and large, it's not. And the wargaming community has been pretty welcoming for the most part. I do think that in general, women are less likely to play war games, but that's just because it doesn't appeal to a lot of women, and that's fine. Like I said, some wargaming doesn't appeal to me. And personally, I consider myself a story gamer. I just think that war games where every player is a different faction and they're vying for different things, they all hold different political power, land, and types of armies. They all have different different stuff going for them, and they're good guys and bad guys. I think that's a story game, and that's what I like.
Yeah. So how do you define between those two? Like, what is the difference between a story game and a whatever you want to call a non-story game? Like, where do you set the limits? For me, I always viewed it as the story game. I didn't really use story game. I always said narrative game, but like a narrative game was one where the narrative was first, and any rules around randomization, what have you, was definitely a far distant second, or they're very minimal. Versus maybe maybe these would be the terms I would use. Maybe narrative game and emergent game, where narrative game there was a story that's being told and the randomization and rules are minimized, whereas emergent game the rules and randomization are higher and the story seems to grow out of it.
I'm not certain that there is a line or that there needs to be a line between the two. I think that emergent story games a lot of times tell better stories than games with predefined stories that the players act out. Emergent stories that come from games that are played by you and your friends, where someone's backstabbing someone else, you have people dealing on the side, people that are just betraying each other, that are allying. That sort of emergent story is more powerful than 99% of what you'll get from a defined story game.
Yeah, I think being able to go, and I've always found too that you don't realize it until after it's over. It's whenever everybody sits down and is chatting about what happened that you then realize, oh wow, some of this was really cool. Like, at least whenever I'm playing, especially if I'm DMing, I don't find I take notice of it in the moment. It's after the session is over and I'm thinking about the session or I'm chatting about the session with people that I'm like, oh, that was really neat. Like that, I don't know any other place where that would have happened type idea.
Right. Nobody's going to write a story that you play into that is going to come out as well as what you and your friends just conjure through your minds. Like, the, at the end of the game, you kind of think back and you're like, man, we just saw the rise and the fall of kingdoms. We saw leaders get assassinated. We saw like new powers take over where the old powers failed. That sort of stuff is powerful. And that's not something you get from a Wizards module or really any story module. That comes from people working together and against each other, each coming and bringing their own thing to the table.
I think every table, after it's been, the players and the DM have been together for a little bit, all start house ruling stuff to better tailor to their needs and what they want to do out of the game. Has there been any particular house rule, whether it's in the current games that you're running or in past games, that you're like, man, if I could put that into the official rule book, is there a rule or a concept that you wish everybody saw, that you've implemented in the game that's worked really well?
That's a really hard question. I don't know that it's about any one rule. I think the rule that has transformed my games most, and I hesitate to say this a little bit because it's a rule I've only been using for, 7, 8 weeks now, is the one-to-one passage of time. I did not realize how much that transformed games. I didn't realize that going from something else to this would change it so much. And it just seemed like something small, but it's not. So I'm going to say that's probably the biggest one. I did not know all the ramifications of that rule, and I've been surprised a lot. Go on.
What would be the most practical tip you'd give somebody to implement it? So you mentioned earlier that you're using like the real world calendar, which I assume makes it a lot easier than if you had some sort of a fantasy calendar. But is there any tools that you're using, or is there any tips that you've got that makes that tracking and implementation of it in reality a little bit easier.
Well-managed Discord channels.
Yeah.
Chat channels between you want a group chat channel, and you want a private chat channel between you and every single player. Well-managed chat channels do a lot with one-to-one time, I think. Just so players have avenues to talk to you, talk to each other, and plot exactly what they want to. Also, I think using a real-world calendar, I'm not going to say it's a must. I am no expert on this. I've been doing this for 7 weeks. I don't know how I am on different podcasts giving people tips to implement this when I have been doing this for 7 weeks. But I would say the two things that are a must are well-organized chat channels, and you have to use the real world calendar. The reason you have to use that is because it makes it so easy for every player. They don't have to come and ask you, what is the date in game? They know what the date in game is. They don't have to come to ask you, oh, I missed 3 sessions. How much time has gone by? They know. They can look at a calendar, and if they can read a calendar, they know how much time they have to work with. They know what they can do, what they can't do. It minimizes the need for them to have to go to you. And a lot of DMs will say, well, I don't mind answering questions, but that's not the point. The point is they don't have to ask. And that's powerful.
Yeah, you might be willing to answer, but they don't necessarily want to have to take the time to put forth the question. Yeah.
They're like, oh, I'm thinking about this at 2 a.m. DM's probably asleep. Joke's on them, I'm not. But DM's probably asleep. I don't want to bug them. I guess I might bug them tomorrow to see if I can if I have enough time to do this. I don't know how much downtime we had. Like, if you're using one-to-one and you're using a real world calendar, they don't need to bug you. They look at it, they know, and they can go forward with their plans.
What is the name of your world?
We've been calling it the Scorched Lands, but I don't know if it has an actual name. We call it that because the player who is playing the Goddess of Light sort of drew into an infernal domain too. So the sun is sort of the enemy of the rest of the world, and she ended up asking if she could like scorch everything and make it a desert before anything began. So we're playing in some sort of a pseudo dark sun at this point.
and not to ask you to pick your favorite of the player children, but of all these gods, which one is the most interesting? Or would it be the goddess of that has just scorched
the earth? I don't know what's most interesting. I'll go over a couple of them. We have one of them is the god of war and time, the eternal conflict. That one's pretty cool. There's also the god of he drew into death and commerce. So he became the inevitable, death and taxes.
Yeah.
That was actually a pretty cool choice for him. And the other one that I really enjoy is the spider god, who was arcana and chaos. So we have like all sorts of wild magic stuff, rifts coming through the world just because of her existence. And the people who worship her are spider people. And I don't know if you've seen this joke on Twitter, because we've memed it a little bit, but her spider followers call themselves the arachno-capitalists.
No, I had not seen that.
Okay.
I will have to look for some of the memes.
So those are fun. And they were all things that my players created themselves. Like, this was not in any sort of lore book. These were just all from my players' brains. It's a very personal experience.
So you mentioned Dark Sun there, like a pseudo Dark Sun. Has there been any, as they've set up the world, or you guys have all together set up the world, and you've seen certain themes come out, has there been any modules or resources from other books that you're like, oh, this has been super helpful in terms of like not necessarily pulling adventures or things like that, but more of like theming and just tips and stuff from them? Or has it been strictly all coming from the table itself?
On the DM side, I would say that the books that have helped me the most on the DM side of things are random generators. I've been using, I believe it's Appendix C in the ADMD DMG a lot. I've been using, let's see, what are the other books I've been using? Untold Encounters of the Random Kind. It has a very nice random dungeon generator that has been absurdly helpful. The Ultimate Toolbox, Tome of Adventure Design,
Personal
books
favorite.
that are, oh, really? You like that
Yeah.
one? That's
Yeah.
great. I love that one. Um, but those books in particular have really helped me generate a lot of stuff on the fly for this because I haven't been prepping from session to session as much as rolling things on the fly and then sort of having me and my players, we will like work through them and be like, all right, this works into the world like this because this is the only way this makes sense to be here. And that's sort of helped us flesh out the lore a lot. We I don't want to give a specific example because it's like steeped in like several levels
It's no, but
of lore, but
one thing you
yeah.
mentioned there though sounded really interesting to me because I know a lot of people feel they have to do all the prep because they don't enjoy or they get anxiety about rolling on a random table at the table because they're worried that it's going to take too long of them having to roll the dice, look up on the table, and then have a moment to stop and think and try to figure out how to work that in. And it sounded, I could be reading it wrong, but it sounded like you're saying that you do the roll and you let everybody know what it is, and then everybody works together to try to figure out how to put it in, rather than it being you go that route. Is that accurate, or is
Um,
that just me projecting that a little bit?
I, I'm not sure that that's something that we do a lot or consciously, but I definitely roll things at the table a lot. Sometimes, if I know what they're doing, I'll roll ahead of time a little bit. But if I don't know what they're doing, I'll just roll it at the table. And a lot of times, what will happen is I'll bring it up, and somebody will say, "Oh, this must be a spawn of this god," and like, of course
Yep.
it is. How did you know? Perfect. So there is some of that going on, but I have kind of given up prep with that game entirely just because I never know what they're going to do. And I've found this weird quirk when you stop prepping for games, you end up freeing the players to do whatever they want because they're no longer concerned with what did the DM prep for. Am I going to derail the DM's prep? I don't want to make the DM lose hours of their time prepping for something that we're not going to do. They lose that entirely, which I understand that's just players trying to be considerate of your time, and that's a good thing. But they lose that mindset entirely and start feeling the freedom of a real RPG where they can do whatever they want. And that's powerful to me. That has transformed my game.
That exact same experience I found as well. And not so much on the, I mean, what you said is completely accurate, but I found it, where the relevation came to me on it was, there was a point in time where players would be trying to figure out what the solution is to, say, a puzzle or a problem, and they were trying to figure out what path I wanted them to go. And once they realized that I didn't think of a solution, I just presented the problem, and it's like, whatever you guys come up with, if it sounds reasonable, that will be the solution. Once they realized that's the way I was going about it, they stopped trying to force where they thought my personality and what my view of how to solve it would be, and started doing it on their own. And that was huge.
It changes games when players realize that they can bring their own personalities into it and there isn't a predefined story and they can just kind of show up and do what they want to do and get all their weird quirks out in your game. Like that changes it. It becomes not the DM's story, but the player's story. And it also minimizes the role that the DM takes, which is kind of big. That's something I didn't realize, but my role's getting smaller and smaller as we go.
Yeah, you're supposed to be there to adjudicate, not to, like,
Yeah.
being able to take that step back is important. Okay, we're getting close on time, so I'll ask a couple of quick questions and then I'll let you go because I know you've got an evening to prepare for. But the I was going to ask this one. I had it written down on my notes, but now as we're talking, I don't know how applicable it is. I was going to say, what's your favorite, like, kind of like low level encounter monster type setup? And then I was like,
Ooh,
she's
ooh, I
playing with
got one. I have
gods,
one. I
but
have one.
okay, go.
Kuatoa. I love Kuatoa.
Okay, and why?
Um, because weird things start happening when they see the players do when they see the players do magical or like amazing things, then weird things start to happen. If a Kuatoa starts going after the players, thinking that they're gods, and it gives me a chance to simp for my players. And And so players will like, just cast a little firebolt, no problem. And then, some Kuo-toa see it, they start worshiping them and they think, oh, hey, look, I got a couple followers. And then the next day they have a tentacle sprouting out of their neck. It's so much fun. I love Kuo-toa encounters.
Do you guys do you have a rule for the gods where the more people that worship them, the more powerful they get?
That's no, we don't. I kind of wish we did. I wish this was a little bit more mechanically grounded in some ways, but not necessarily, no.
Because I've always kind of that's been something I've played in the back of my head with, because I like letting if a player wants to play a cleric, I let them kind of create the god, because I've always deemed that gods come and go in a multi-god world based off of who's following them. So if you're following them, then yes, the god that you chose is there. But I've always thought about mechanicizing, putting some mechanics behind that as well. But all right, you've also done, like I said, we mentioned earlier, you've done a bunch of different chats and you're starting your own. Is there anything that somebody hasn't asked you yet, or something that I should have asked that I haven't asked? Is there a question that you're like, on all of these, man, I wish somebody would just ask me this and they haven't asked yet? I love that response. I get it every time I ask this question. Everybody's just like, how was I supposed to answer that?
Oh man, it's a hard one. I don't know.
What's something that people have no idea about you, because it doesn't come up generally in like normal gaming talk, but
Yeah.
kind of defines who you are? Like, what brings you this? What caused you to be the super aggressive, nice person?
I just don't like getting into conflict online. I like to listen to a bunch of different ideas. I like to listen to people. I like to hear what people are saying and apply ideas that I think are good to my games. And I kind of have a mindset of let people speak, and I don't like to get into conflict with people very much. So I'm generally nice if I agree or disagree with you. I think that every single person on Twitter, every single person in the world, I probably have some sort of disagreement with. So if people say something that I don't like whatever, that's fine. I don't know. As far as something I wish someone would ask me that I never get to talk about because it doesn't come up, I have other hobbies other than RPGs. I just don't even post about them.
Well, tell me one, because I've got a bunch as well.
Nature. I live in Florida. I
So
go out all the time. And,
you live in America's Australia, where everything tries to kill you.
Yes, it's the opposite of Canada. But I live in Florida and I see like alligators, otters, manatees, stuff like that all the time. And I think they're really, really cool. And I try to share them on Twitter occasionally. But whenever I do, it just falls flat. People are like, 0 out of 10, not D&D. So and it's a shame because I love this stuff. I love to go out to my local park and watch the sunset over the lake. It's beautiful. I enjoy nature more than about anything. But I don't share about that a lot on Twitter, but I don't know. Sometimes I share pictures, but people will be like, oh, yep, that sure is an alligator. But,
Are you an animal person? Do you have
yes.
pets and what have you?
I have a couple cats, but for the most part, I like to go out and watch nature. I just like to go out near the lake and walk and see what I can see. I've seen some beautiful things: bobcats, raccoons, alligators, beautiful birds. I love birds. I love birds so much. There's like these birds here, and they remind me of myself because they're as tall as me. They're called sandhill cranes. I don't know if you know the type of bird. I love them. I think they're beautiful because they always travel in family units. And I love birds that like mate for life. I think it's just the most beautiful thing. And I always love watching them. And they also have like red heads, so they remind me of myself. But
do you? And I'm
yeah.
sure you get lots of Canadian cobra chickens coming down. If you're not familiar with a cobra chicken, it is what we call the Canadian geese.
Oh yeah, geese. Those sure do count as birds, don't they?
Yeah, they're something. They're
Yeah.
they're closer to the dinosaur family than the rest of the birds, I think.
I used to work at a call center and I had like these geese out front that had a nest and I I was late one day because I could not approach the front of the building because I had this angry goose honking at me and just hissing and guarding the front doors. Oh, it was terrible. I was like 22 and I was scared of that angry goose.
I had a friend come up to visit me from Missouri. He came up to Canada to visit, and he had not really had any encounters with Canadian geese. He had heard everybody talk about them. He was like, whatever. And we were down near the shore. I live fairly close to Lake Ontario, and we were down by Lake Ontario, and there was a bunch of geese down there. And he saw them. He's like, "Oh, that's really cool." And he wanted to get up close, and I was like, "You can go up close, but like if they get mad at you, you're gonna know it." And he was acting all brave and bravado about it. And he's a fairly big guy. He got up close and this goose started chasing him. I've never seen that guy run so fast in my life. It was hilarious. But
Yeah. It's so for me, oh, I hate geese so much because like I
I like
remember
how I got you going from I
Mhm.
love birds to I
No,
hate
okay.
geese.
I barely even count geese as birds because I used to like go up and feed them at my local park, right? And they wouldn't be thankful that I gave them food. They would start hissing at me when it was gone. Like, what is that? Be thankful, you little shits. Can I say shits? I'm
Yeah, yeah,
sorry.
you can say whatever you like.
Okay.
The the meme that Canadians use is that you know how stereotypically we're always supposed to be so nice and say please and thank you and sorry and all the time. We channeled all our anger into those feathered fens and then sent them south every winter.
It's gotta be. The only animal that we have down here that are like meaner than those geese are the monkeys.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. The Florida monkeys are mean.
I've actually never. I don't think I've ever seen a monkey in Florida. I've seen them
Yeah.
in like I've gone down to Florida a couple times for as a starting for a destination like taking a cruise from Florida, what have you.
Uh-huh.
And then when I've gone on the
So
cruise and gone to different islands or different places like that, I've seen monkeys, but I've never seen one in Florida.
yeah, the monkeys are concentrated in a couple areas. They were brought here for like the filming of I believe a King Kong movie. And they
When they
just sort
got
of
loose.
yeah, they got loose and they did quite well. So we have monkeys in some parts of Florida now, and they are mean. And people like warn you not to get close to them because they oh gosh, what do they transmit? Herpes, I think. Yeah, they'll bite you and you get like herpes from it or something. I don't know. Maybe I
Wow.
have the wrong disease. It's don't take this as fact. I might just be making this up. I don't know.
Regardless, herpes sounds it's bad enough. You don't need to, don't need to make it
Right?
anything.
You got to tell your wife, like, honey, I swear I got bit by a monkey.
Yeah.
So bad.
Yeah, sorry. I was in Florida and there was this cute monkey.
Right. I got the monkeys. I don't know what you want from me.
Yeah, sounds completely believable. I'm sure there'll be no be no questions that come out of that.
Sure.
All right. So if people want to go and become the umpteenth person that gets retweeted by you, how do they find you?
I
Because you
am.
retweet everybody.
Do I? Yeah, I didn't know that was a thing I do. I am at Ginger Blast on Twitter. I am Harmony_Ginger on YouTube. And those are all my socials. Anything else on any other social media you find of me is probably not me, or it's an old account. Just don't follow it.
Thank you very much for coming on the show today. I hope this was a pleasant conversation, and I can't wait to see how yours goes this evening. And welcome to getting into hosting your own.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me. I had a great time.
All right, folks, that's going to wrap up this episode of the Red Caps podcast. I hope you enjoyed, you learned something, and that you are eager to come back for more. www.theredcaps.net has all the links for all the ways to get in contact with me, and I'd love to hear from you. Thank you again very so much for listening. Remember, never let your caps dry out. Stay safe, have fun. We'll talk again soon. Take care.